What's going on, everybody? GoodMicWork Commentaries back at you with a very special Patreon donation video. This is going to be a really fun topic. I was really pleased to receive this request from a really awesome listener and great supporter of the channel. And buddy, I'm going to do my best here not to butcher your name, and I'm going to call you Claudio Clavidetscher. Am I right? Am I even close to that? Just in case I'm not, I'm going to call you Claudio C. You were very generous to make a donation over on Patreon, and your video request was to have a commentary done on the WWE career of Cesaro. And you kind of have an interesting story as to why you like Cesaro. Number one, your name. You know, we all know Cesaro is Claudio Castagnoli, and you have a very similar name. Your first name's Claudio with a very long last name that starts with a C. So you guys have that in common. You're also from the same country. And what I want to do here prior to discussing this topic is I also want to read you guys a little bit of the message that Claudio sent me when he originally requested this video, because your story is somewhat similar to mine when I was younger with one of my favorite wrestlers named Bret Hart. And some of the words you wrote was kind of very reminiscent of the same type of feelings and the same type of connection I had with some of my favorite wrestlers when I was younger. And I really appreciated your message and your story. Before we get into that, though, I just want to welcome any new listeners that might be tuning in for the first time. Please click that subscribe button. We are about to surpass 24,000 on the YouTube channel, and I am eyeballing 25,000 before the end of 2018. So your subscription will help out there. And let's hook up Claudio with a lot of likes on this video. It's a subject that's very passionate to him and very close to his heart. So let's hook him up with, I don't know, at least 300 likes. I think Claudio deserves at least that. Make sure you click that notifications bell also so you can be notified on all future videos. If you would like to listen to this in podcast form, it's downloadable over on my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com, or you can listen to me on Spotify, iTunes, or Stitcher Radio. You guys know the drill on everything else. Make sure you share this video and give me a follow at GoodMicWork over on Twitter. I'm always very vocal on the Twitter machine. So getting back to Claudio's story and why he has this connection to Cesaro and why he wants this video done, like I said, I'm going to pull up his original message that he sent to me and read you a portion of it. I did get Claudio's permission to do this, so he should be cool with it. And I'm going to skip over your first few sentences because really all you did there, Claudio, was just heap extremely heavy praise onto me, and I appreciate all your kind words and all the nice thoughts, and everything that you said in your message was very touching, and I appreciate it. But I'm going to kind of gloss over that, and I'm going to pick up with your wrestling background. And you write, I fell in love with the WWF for the first time when I saw it on TV as a child back home in Switzerland in 1993. My first pay-per-view was that year's SummerSlam. I went to my first live event in Zurich in 1994 after WrestleMania 10, and have since been to many live events, including the entire WrestleMania 31 weekend in San Jose. A few years ago, just around the time my mother passed away, this Swiss guy named Claudio Castagnoli, aka Cesaro, showed up in the WWE. Being that my name is Claudio and we have a similar name and that I grew up 1 hour away from him in Switzerland, I immediately felt connected to him and I wanted him to succeed so badly. It may sound stupid, but his success, example, Andre the Giant Battle Royal win, helped me a lot with the coping of my mother's death. I even ended up meeting him one day at a mall in New Jersey and talked to him for a bit. Anyway, to keep a long story short, I have no idea if Cesaro as a general topic will give you enough material for an interesting hour-long podcast. I just feel that many fans seem to think that he is being underutilized. I think so too, but then again, I couldn't possibly make a rational decision. In regards to him, it's always emotional as well. And you close the message by basically telling me that you're really interested to hear my opinions on Cesaro. So that was a really cool message because number one, you know, finding a wrestler that you can connect with and get behind and live vicariously through, and even how you said, you know, when you lost your mother, you know, following him and watching his work just kind of helped you cope with that in some way. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I was the same way. Granted, I didn't deal with the tragedy as unfortunate as yours with the loss of your mother, but still, you know, my connection to Bret Hart, it was kind of just like an escape, and not even just Bret Hart, just wrestling in general. But I always found myself being really emotionally invested in what Bret did. I was always very much interested in Bret's, you know, road back to the title. You know, anytime he'd lose the belt, I'd be bummed out or depressed. It was different back then. It's not like the wrestling fans of today. You know, if my favorite wrestler lost or was treated what I felt to be unfairly, you didn't even really say it like that. I was never complaining that Bret Hart was being misused and they shouldn't take the belt off of him. I was just mad and sad that the belt was off of him. But when it comes to Cesaro, no truer words have ever been spoken than Cesaro is underutilized. He absolutely has been, to a ridiculous level, because this guy is imaginably talented, and he hasn't exactly had the worst career in the company. He's a multi-time champion, with a long run there and probably a lot more years left, but he has not lived up to what he has been capable of, and we'll get into that here. We'll get into his WWE run, at least what I remember of it, because you got to remember, my memory in modern times can be a little bit hazy here, but there are plenty of Cesaro moments that I did remember off the top of my head, and I went back and watched a couple of matches and jotted down some notes. And, it's going to be weird to say some of the stuff out loud, because as I was writing these notes down, I was almost getting angry, because I'm actually seeing on paper how badly this guy was underutilized. Let's just backtrack a little bit and talk about the man, Cesaro, Claudio Castagnoli. He was born on December 27th, 1980 in Switzerland. So that makes him, 38 years old? He's about to turn 38 here this month. And he's incredibly intelligent. He speaks 5 languages: English, French, Italian, German, and Swiss German. Prior to WWE, he had a pretty lengthy independent run. He was all over the place. He worked in Ring of Honor, PWG, Combat Zone Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Noah, all sorts of different promotions. I was only sort of following independent wrestling back then. My only real memories of Cesaro prior to coming to WWE was his tag team with Chris Hero, the Kings of Wrestling. I do know they had a couple of Ring of Honor title runs, one of which I think went almost a year until Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin beat him. And I remember seeing a few matches here and there of him around that time. I even remember when he had some longer hair, and kind of forgot about him after that until he was signed to WWE, I think around 2011, and he was sent to Florida to work in Florida Championship Wrestling for a little bit. And then I remember his debut. He debuted right after WrestleMania, I think 28. It was 2012, and he debuted on SmackDown. It was sort of a tryout match, and I remember what I didn't like about it. I believe he beat Tyson Kidd, who he would wind up teaming with later on. And that was when Oksana was in WWE. She was with Cesaro during that early time, and they were calling him Antonio Cesaro. They hadn't dropped the Antonio yet. And one thing I remember not liking about that match when I watched it back was that the announcers were talking about his background and that he was a former rugby player, but he quit rugby because it wasn't tough enough. And I'm like, my God, how many times have they used that line on some wrestler coming in? They used to say the same thing about Hacksaw Jim Duggan, that he left pro football because it wasn't tough enough. They used to say the same thing about Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and I'm pretty sure they used to say the same thing about Vader. So a lot of times they've used that excuse of, oh, they quit this sport because it wasn't tough enough. It's kind of generic, and I remember not thinking that it was necessary. I'm like, this guy has got so much other qualities about him that you can use and borrow from to come up with some better story than this generic ass, I'm just a tough guy shit. But it really didn't take him long once he got to WWE. I mean, once he got to the main roster, because NXT was not formed, I don't believe, when he was there. So he just worked in Florida Championship Wrestling before coming up to WWE. And it didn't take long. I'm pretty sure by SummerSlam, yes, it was SummerSlam actually, of that year, he won the U.S. title from Santino Marella. Now, I remember that match because it was really dumb. And this was still back, could you imagine if they were doing this shit now with the United States title? We'd all be mortified. But back in 2012, this seemed to be perfectly fine. The United States title being defended on a kickoff show. And this was when Santino Marella was doing the Cobra's sock, kind of like Mr. Sacco. And basically, he's going for the Cobra on Cesaro, but Oksana jumps up on the apron and distracts, not Santino, but distracts the Cobra. And this is a title match, and he's worrying about keeping this sock puppet off of Oksana, and that's when Cesaro catches him, hits him with his finisher, and wins the United States title. So it was a really dumb match, and I thought a really kind of hokey-ass way for Cesaro to win his first singles title in the WWE, but he went on a long run. I want to say it was about 8 months, 9 months, somewhere around there, until he would drop it to Kofi, who would then drop it to Dean, who would go on like a year-long run. So in the matter of just 2 years, I think they only had 3 United States champions. So Cesaro and Ambrose's runs were what I remember around that time. But, that initial victory for Cesaro was kind of shit. And his title run, although it was long, there weren't that many memorable moments, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, because he wasn't featured in a prominent role. He was doing a lot of these kickoff matches and opening card matches, and just the United States title was not treated very well, I guess, back then. It doesn't seem like the U.S. title really got important in my mind until John Cena took it back in 2015. But prior to this, the U.S. title needed some help. And even though Cesaro had a hell of a long run there and an impressive run, he still just wasn't somebody in WWE around that time that was really being appreciated. But the one thing that he had going for him was the fact that he was just incredible in the ring. He had a great look. He is stupid, ridiculously strong. I mean, scary fucking strong. And he does, I was reading some of his workout regimen shit, and he was talking about how he does kind of a combination of Olympic weightlifting and CrossFit. I mean, that guy is an absolute horse, and we've seen him perform some unreal feats of strength on WWE TV over the years. I think one of my favorite parts of Cesaro's career was when he went back, or when he went down to NXT in 2013 and worked several matches with Sami Zayn. They had that really good 2 out of 3 falls match on NXT in August of 2013, I believe. And then he would go on to face Sami Zayn again at NXT Arrival, and they were just classics. I think that's when I really started appreciating NXT. That's when I really started taking notice. And I think that's also when a lot of fans just collectively started realizing, like, holy shit, this NXT thing is going to be a big deal, and it's gotten nothing but better since. And I credit a lot of the way the NXT atmosphere is now with the fan involvement and how much the fans really appreciate the matches and the wrestling and the in-ring work and the ability. A lot of that kind of mindset all started with those early matches with Sami Zayn and Cesaro, and those were great, and they're still fun to go back and take a look at. I was watching some highlights of those matches when I was making my notes for this, and I'm like, man, I should really go back and just watch the whole thing all the way through. And it was finally a couple of really good wins for Cesaro, and it was good that he went down there and picked up a couple of victories. But, again, on the main roster, they still didn't give a shit. It wasn't until 2014 that they really started saying, okay, maybe we'll try to give this guy a push. Because after he came back from NXT, or during his time in NXT in 2013, that's when he had that alliance with Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter. I was surprised to see that they never won the tag team titles. In my head, I thought that they had, but I guess the Real Americans never did have a run with the tag belts, but they were over. The whole We the People thing, it was one of the most memorable things Cesaro had done up until that time, at least in WWE. But the tag team would wind up just dissipating because Cesaro would enter the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at WrestleMania 30, and he would win it by body slamming the Big Show over the top rope in one of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history. I loved it. I thought that was going to be the day that Cesaro arrived. And it really should have been when you look back on it, because I was excited at the concept of the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. I've watched every WrestleMania all the way from the very first one. Andre the Giant occupies a huge part of my wrestling memory, and I watched him win Battle Royals as a kid, and I watched him win Battle Royals at WrestleManias as a kid. So for them to have this inaugural Battle Royal, name it after Andre, erect a statue in his honor, and do this annually every WrestleMania, I could not have been happier. Unfortunately, the Battle Royal does not feel anywhere near as special as I wanted it to, or as special as it did that first year. Because when Cesaro won that was a big moment, and I was so happy, and I'm pretty sure it was the next night on Raw or the week after. That's when he dropped his alliance with Zeb Coulter and became a Paul Heyman guy. And then it was on. Then we were like, okay, this guy's going to be a world champion. How can he not be? He's aligned himself with Paul Heyman. He's a hell of a lot better than Ryback, who Heyman was previously aligned with, who didn't work out. And I think he was even with Axel prior to this too. So Heyman had a couple of misses, but he had a lot of hits with Brock Lesnar and CM Punk. And I thought Cesaro was such a better fit for Paul Heyman than a Kurt Axel or a Ryback, but it didn't work out. They stick him with Paul Heyman. You think it's a sure thing? This guy's going to be a badass world champion? Hell, this is somebody that could even challenge Brock one day. Cesaro's big enough, strong enough, and capable enough to give Brock Lesnar an amazing match. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a properly pushed Cesaro in his prime versus Brock Lesnar? Oh my God. I don't think it gets any better than that. But missed opportunity. WWE took this great momentum, this big WrestleMania victory, this bombshell that he's now aligned with the most successful manager arguably in wrestling history. How can they go wrong? Well, I'll tell you how they can go wrong. This motherfucker literally lost every match, it felt like, once he joined up with Paul Heyman. April, May, June, July, throughout the entire summer, he was losing. And I think it was somewhere around July that he went his separate ways from Paul Heyman. And I thought that was just a huge mistake. It's like WWE didn't even try. He had the momentum. The fans are behind him. Everybody wants to see him succeed. He might not be over to the, level of pop that Daniel Bryan was getting with the yes chants and all of that, but the fans definitely loved Cesaro and they definitely cared about him. But he constantly lost. I think he failed several times trying to win back the United States title. Actually, incidentally, there was one really good match that he did have prior to WrestleMania and prior to his alliance with Paul Heyman, but he did work with John Cena on Raw in February of 2014, which I think is still regarded as one of the best Monday Night Raw matches in history. And I remember because it was funny, just a few days, like 3 days before that on SmackDown the previous week, he also had a classic match with Randy Orton. So within the span of 1 week on Raw and SmackDown, he had two instant classics with Randy Orton and John Cena. Then he goes into Mania for that big victory. Then he aligns himself with Paul Heyman. What the fuck went wrong? It's so frustrating to look back at Cesaro's 2014 and the way it started compared to the way it ended. Unbelievable. And I remember Stone Cold Steve Austin asked Vince McMahon that on the podcast. It was right after Thanksgiving when CM Punk appeared on Colt Cabana's podcast and spilled his guts as to why he left WWE back at the Royal Rumble. And then a week after that is when McMahon was on Austin's podcast on the WWE Network. And Austin asked him point blank, he's like, what's going on with Cesaro? He literally had no answer for Steve Austin. Austin said, like, what's going on with this guy? What's he missing? And McMahon says, I don't know what he's missing. He's not connecting somewhere. He lacks some of the verbal skills, and we're not sure why he's not connecting, but the audience have to care about you. You have to command a presence. And he says all this shit, and then Austin is like, I cared about him. He goes, I'm telling you right now, after I watched him at WrestleMania and aligned himself with Paul Heyman, once he made that split from Jack Swagger, he goes, I started to like the cat. I started respecting his in-ring work. I started to get behind him. So when you're saying the fans have to care about you, I'm saying that I care about him. So it really goes to show you sometimes how WWE just has no clue what to do with guys. They say they try to listen to the audience, but we all know and we all remember back in 2014, we were all singing the praises of Cesaro. He was on the top of all of our lists, maybe even over somebody like Bray Wyatt or another really great character that came around that time. He was on the top of everybody's list as a guy that we could see being a future world champion. Guys like Cesaro and guys like Daniel Bryan. I thought Cesaro was... He might not have been connecting on the level that Daniel Bryan was, but he was definitely connecting. And all they really had to do was write him in situations that will allow the fans to get behind him even easier. But they never did. They never gave him a chance. He lost all the time, and it was frustrating as hell. It's still frustrating as we're talking about it now because I feel WWE lost out on a chance to have a main eventer. They lost out on a chance to have a guy the caliber of a Brock Lesnar or a Roman Reigns or someone like that. I truly believe in my heart that Cesaro has that ability. He's too good. He's too talented. He's too strong. He's too respected. You talk about a champion that will carry himself well. I've always said that about John Cena. All the fans that hated John Cena throughout the years, I was like, the guy keeps his nose clean. He's respectful. Everybody likes him. He never comes off as a douchebag. He's certainly not Shawn Michaels. He's just a good guy to send out there doing PR stuff because he carries himself well. He dresses nice. He looks like a star. He's charming. There's just so many good qualities about John Cena personally that made him such a good fit for that top spot. But I think Cesaro has every single one of those qualities that John Cena does. The dude looks like James Bond or Jason Statham. He just looks like an awesome dude, a badass, somebody that can speak eloquently and not come off like a dumbass, and he can represent professional wrestling well and with respect. That's what we want. That's all we ever want. So I will never, for the life of me, understand what went wrong in 2014 with Cesaro. Just looking back, it's like, man, it was right there on a silver goddamn platter. When you look back to how devastating 2014 was, 2015 really wasn't that much better. But he did have a lot of great matches again, and one of them was with John Cena. It was one of those U.S. title open challenges. It was in the summer of 2015 sometime. I remember watching it, and it was one of the best fucking matches I've ever seen. He lost. Of course he lost, but it was a great match. And he had a lot of really good matches with John Cena. And I've always been a Cena defender, but I will say this. I wish Cesaro would have been able to beat him. From what I can remember, I don't think Cesaro ever held a victory over John Cena. Definitely not a clean one. Worked with him a lot of times. Worked with him a couple of times in 2014 and worked with him a couple of times in 2015 for the United States title, but was never able to really beat John Cena. I think that would have been another match that would have been a nice kind of launching pad for Cesaro, and it was certainly a loss that Cena could afford and would do great things for Cesaro. So for whatever reason, WWE just never pulled the trigger on him. They came so close a few times, no matter how many times he proved himself in the ring, no matter how many times he went out there and had a great match with just about everybody, displayed amazing athleticism and ridiculous strength, and basically just showcased to WWE that he has all the tools. Everything you need is right here in front of your face, wrestling in your own damn ring. I'm your fucking employee. Use me, do something with me, get your money's worth out of me. And they never did. So, effed up. But still, Cesaro managed to connect. He had a Cesaro section. He always had the fans that were there to see him and to support him. But to me, it was never as good as it could have been. His kind of alliance with Sheamus is when I really started liking Cesaro again. Not that I ever stopped liking him, but I actually started, I should say, caring about Cesaro again, because I liked the way that team came together. And I remember it vividly because I was saying on Twitter and I was saying in my podcast during that time that I thought for sure this was going to wind up leading to an alliance and a tag team between the two. And that's exactly what they did. They had the best of 7 series that went on in 2016. I can't remember what part is 2016. But I think if I remember right, didn't they go like 3-0? Didn't like Sheamus win the first 3 and Cesaro came back and won the next 3? And then in the 7th match, it went to a no contest or something. And that prompted GM McFoley. He goes, I don't want to see you guys beat each other up for the 8th consecutive match. Instead, I'm going to team you up and I'm going to give you a tag team title shot. And I called this too. Not that I'm bragging, but I do remember vividly saying this over and over again when they got together and they weren't liking it. Remember when they were forced to be together, they were still kind of enemies. They just had a best of 7 series. They do not like each other and they were kind of one-upping each other at first. And they really didn't enjoy teaming together. They were constantly arguing, but I knew they were going to fall in love. I just knew it because there's no other way for it to go. You can't feud again. You just got done having 100 matches against each other. You got to go in some sort of a different direction here. Both guys were kind of floundering in singles, but they were both kind of, semi-mid-card to semi-main event guys. So you put them together, you formed a pretty unstoppable team. And in time, they grew to love each other. They became homeboys. They started wearing the matching outfits. They gave themselves a tag team name and they were entertaining. I thought they really played off each other well and helped each one of their personalities come out more. I like the chemistry between the two, and I've been an overall fan of the team ever since they were formed. And I like the way they came together by feuding like that and forming an alliance based on mutual respect. And look at them now. They went on to win several tag team titles. I don't know how many times they've won the titles. I want to say 4. And they are a pretty badass team, and I've always loved the Bar. Always loved them. And as of the recording of this commentary on December 1st, 2018, they are tag team champions on the SmackDown brand. So I am never going to complain about a title belt being around Cesaro's waist because he's awesome. The dude is tough as nails, too. My God, what pay-per-view was it? It was about a year ago. It was either No Mercy or SummerSlam last year when he knocked his teeth out on the ring post. It's still one of the gnarliest injuries I can ever remember. I have a phobia and this just aversion to anything like teeth related or broken jaws or broken mouths. That stuff just gives me the fucking willies. And when he slammed his face on that ring post and knocking out all of his teeth and then continues on with the match, he is just, he could be a hockey player. The dude is just a badass. I mean, he not only took that shot, but after having a quick checkup by the doctors at ringside, got right back in there and finished the match. Took all sorts of selfies backstage. This guy's missing half of his mouth and he's smiling for selfies to go up on Instagram, on Twitter. He thought it was hilarious. I'd be back there screaming for my mommy. And this guy's like, yeah, selfie, big deal. And went and got his dental work done, I think, that night. And he was wearing a mouth guard shortly after that. He might still wear one. But that was one of the worst injuries I can ever remember as far as just the grossness of it. Like, oh my God. But he's a badass. If that was me, I'd be I would run out of the match. I'd probably be fired by WWE because if I hit my face on that ring post, I would hold my mouth and I would dart right to the backstage area, right to get medical attention, which would probably result in a release and a future endeavor of good old mic work if I decided to be a pussy to that level. But Cesaro was anything but. That dude's a man's man, and he is tough as they come. That's for sure. As far as the future of Cesaro, that's anyone's guess. You know, part of me wonders how long the alliance with Sheamus will last, if these guys will split up in time, because, you know, Sheamus might want to have another quick singles run. I know he's been plagued with some injuries, and a tag team is probably a good fit for Sheamus. But if he ever decides, because Sheamus is, I think he's 40 years old now, if Sheamus ever does want to have, you know, another quick run, you know, as a singles, they might want to do that soon, so they might break up the team. Cesaro is only 38 years old. He's got a little bit of time left. It's not too late. But even though I think that, and I really hate to be a cynic here, I think they missed their window. I think, oh man, I really hate to say that, but I really think the opportunity for Cesaro to become a big name star, to become that WrestleMania main eventer level guy, I think that ship has sailed. I think WWE ruined it. I completely blame them. I certainly don't blame Cesaro. He did every single thing in his power to get himself over and showed us what great wrestling talent he had literally every time he got in the ring. So this one's on WWE for not making this one work out. I would like to keep an open mind. I would really like to think that maybe he can split from Sheamus and get the fans behind him and get one world title under his belt, or under his waist, or around his waist, I should say. And it would be really nice if that could happen. I think it would mean a lot to the fans. It certainly would mean a lot to you, Claudio, and I know it would mean a lot to me as well to see a guy like Cesaro get the moment that he deserves. I don't know what it is. Maybe us bald guys all stick together. So me and the two Claudios have got each other's backs, that's for sure. And I'm really hoping, and I'm always going to keep my fingers crossed, and I'm not going to quite give up yet on Cesaro, that something big can still be in his future and it's not too late. But unfortunately, a lot of times WWE doesn't see greatness when it's staring him right in the face. But if you think about how many great matches there could be had between a properly pushed over Cesaro against a guy like Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Brock Lesnar, AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, so many great wrestlers that he may have worked with a time or two in the past, but, you know, having a big world title program or just a big top storyline in WWE with one of those opponents, you know, booked in a long, fun feud, I think could be incredible. I think the guy could literally work with anybody. WWE clearly feels otherwise, but I sincerely hope, Claudio, that you've still had enough good moments with Cesaro's career, because like I said, I very much enjoyed his tag team with Sheamus. I think the Bar's an excellent team, and I think they're a fun team and an entertaining team. He's really proven himself in the ring time and time again. All the matches that I listed earlier on, the great matches he had on TV with John Cena, his matches in NXT with Sami Zayn, a lot of great matches and moments where we've been given glimpses of how great Cesaro is. I hope as a fan that you've had enough of that to really satisfy you enough. I hope, you know, as a really strong supporter of Cesaro, that you've enjoyed his wrestling career and you enjoy going back and taking a look at some of his matches. And, you know, you didn't even really want me to talk about his career prior to WWE, but, you know, I would recommend doing that, because I remember when I started getting into Bret Hart back in the 80s when he was in the Hart Foundation, it was around the early 90s, about the time when he won the Intercontinental title for the first time. That's when I really started digging into his past, because I knew of Stampede Wrestling and I knew of Stu Hart, but I really never went back and saw a lot of those early Bret Hart matches. And that's when I started watching Bret Hart and the Dynamite Kid from Stampede Wrestling, and being able to see who Bret used to be before he got to WWE and all the great matches he was having, you know, working for his dad, was incredible. And it was really, it almost made me feel closer to Bret, that I felt like I knew his whole history now. And I recommend you do the same thing, because I know Cesaro has had a lot of great moments prior to his career in WWE. He's had a lot of great feuds. He's really well trained. I didn't mention this earlier on, but I meant to say that his early training came in Switzerland, but he was also trained by guys like Chris Hero, who we tag team with for a long time, and Dave Taylor. And Dave Taylor's a fucking boss. So he's had some really good guys that were instrumental in his training, and he's had a high level of training. So hopefully one day Cesaro will write a book. Hell, he might have already written a book for all I know, but I don't think that he has. But hopefully one day he'll come out with an autobiography that you can read and even learn more. I do know that he really loves to cook. He seems like a really cultured guy. Like I said, he's intelligent. He's well-read. He's well-spoken. The guy has got every single thing you would ever want in a professional wrestler, especially, like I said earlier, the way wrestling is kind of given a bad rap and the way it's looked at by the public and by non-wrestling fans. We need as many guys like Cesaro as we can possibly get. The guy is an absolute marvelous representation of professional wrestling. I'm proud that he is a professional wrestler. I'm proud to be a fan of his. And when I see him out in public, I'm proud of the way he represents professional wrestling, because not a lot of guys represent it the way he does. I've never heard one unkind word spoken about Cesaro. Not once have I ever heard a wrestling fan say, oh, he was a dick to me, or he didn't sign my autograph, or whatever. You know, everybody just thinks the world of the guy. He's respected as hell by his peers, and hopefully the least WWE can do is give this guy a job for as long as he's able to wrestle and pay him well, because he goddamn deserves it. So anyway, I hope that is sufficient, Claudio. I really hope. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do an hour-long video. There's just not enough material there. But I wanted to at least give you as many thoughts as I possibly could on Cesaro and what my memories are of him in WWE, and how I also feel that he's underutilized. Like I said, I've been venting a lot of my frustrations about Cesaro in this video, just because, you know, when you say it out loud and you actually read the words in front of you, you're like, holy crap, WWE really did not do what they should have done with this guy. And I really feel like they lost a huge, huge opportunity to have a megastar on their hands. But Cesaro is still one of my favorites. You know, luckily for us, a guy that talented and that capable, all that's going to shine through all the shit that WWE does wrong with him. And we've been able to see what an awesome badass Cesaro really is. And despite all of the flaws with WWE's handling of him, I still think he's had a decent WWE career. He's held a lot of titles, and I would like to think that he's a Hall of Famer. I really would. I think that he is. I think a world title win wouldn't hurt his chances. But right now, based on his resume, sure, Cesaro's definitely a Hall of Famer. He's too good for the wrestling business, I believe, and too good for the WWE. It's almost like I feel like WWE just doesn't deserve him. You know, sometimes they don't deserve guys that are that talented because they're so stupid in the booking that they really don't have any business employing a guy like that anyway, because they don't know what to do with him. It's kind of like when Bret Hart went to WCW, kind of the same thing. It's like, what are you doing, WWE? So I want to thank you very much, Claudio, for your awesome donation, your video requests. Like I said, because of my, you know, similar connection to Bret Hart and how you were mentioning how Cesaro really helps you cope with things and how he can kind of act as that type of escape. I think a lot of us wrestling fans can relate to that, because I think a lot of wrestling fans really have that connection, not only to maybe their favorite wrestlers, but just the business itself. You know, because not a lot of people are wrestling fans. So if you're a wrestling fan, sometimes you're a closet wrestling fan, and that can kind of be your little escape. It always was for me as a kid growing up. I've told stories, you know, in live streams and stuff over the years. My parents were very cool. I had my own room as a kid from age 10 all the way through the end of high school. My bedroom was over our garage, completely secluded from the rest of the house. All three bedrooms, my sister's and my parents' bedroom, were all on one side of the house, and I was all by myself on the other. I had my little haven up there. It was my own personal, private little space where I could get away from it all, and I could watch professional wrestling, and I would lay in my bed late at night with my little 13-inch Magnavox TV, and I would watch tapes of Bret Hart matches. And I just have a lot of memories of kind of having that similar connection to a particular wrestler, much like you do with Cesaro. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys, please let me know all of your thoughts, opinions, comments on Cesaro. What are some other great matches from his WWE career that I may have missed? I know he did a shit ton prior to WWE, and you're more than welcome to mention that. But like I said, this video topic was on his WWE career. That's why I didn't touch on much of his indie work. Plus, because aside from his Kings of Wrestling tag team with Chris Hero, I don't really know much about his independent work. All I know is what we saw over the last 6 or 7 years in WWE. But I've always been a fan of Cesaro, but I got to tell you, Claudio, I think your message and all of the words you spoke about him made me a fan of his even more. So I wish Cesaro nothing but the best. Claudio, I wish you nothing but the best. If you are ever down here in the San Diego area, because I know you were up in San Jose for WrestleMania 31, if you ever find yourself down here in the whale's vagina, please hit me up. I would absolutely love to meet you. So you guys take care. If you are listening to this on the day that it is uploaded, 1 week from today, there's going to be another Patreon donation video, and that one's coming courtesy of John, and that will be a really fun subject as well. So I will talk to you guys in just a couple of days for that. Take care of yourselves, and be cool. Talk to you soon. Peace.
This has been a Good Mike Work Commentaries production. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/GoodMicWork. Follow Greg Morgan on Twitter @GoodMicWork and visit GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com for all the latest podcast and video content.